The Fantasmagorium show presents guns, martinis, gadgets, and guns. Welcome back to our regular James Bond continuity where no one ever dies and nothing ever matters. Tracy Bond is dead. George Lazenby isn't even James Bond. Connery is back. Wait, who's Tracy? This week, we have so much to say about Diamonds Are Forever. I am Scotty. My opposite number of Catherine went rogue, and Steve is Willard White. Hey, guys.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. I just watched the movie for the
I
first
know.
since I last marathoned them all in February of last year.
I am somewhat, you know what? I have to talk to the audience directly. I'm somewhat flummoxed. We're talking seconds before the show started. I had rewritten the entry and being like, Cat's gone rogue. I'm on my own. I'm talking about Diamonds Are Forever. But then all of a sudden at the 45-second mark, Cat shows up. Anyway, how did you find the film?
It's I don't know exactly what type of genre I would even classify it in. It's like, it feels definitely like if it wasn't James Bond, I think it would be a very cult film, like 70s. I mean, obviously not blaxploitation, but in that type of direction for weirdness, at least for the type of movie that it is.
Kind of like a low rent Vanishing Point kind of thing?
Kind of. But very vintage 70s. It definitely has that feel to it.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And in general, I find it really we can't just, you're still on your way to seeing No Time to Die again.
Yeah, I'll be seeing it for the fourth time tomorrow. This time will be in 3D 40X.
Okay. Do you think you'll be able to withstand all of the jiggling? Seems like a physically exhausting exertion.
I've heard a lot about 40X. I didn't even realize there was such a theater anywhere in my region. And it's like, tomorrow's the last day that it's playing there for 40X. So we're like, hey, buddy and I hey, let's go. Let's try it out. So.
Well, I look forward to hearing how. So you like the film?
Yeah.
Now, after having seen it for 3 times, going on your 4th, do you think that this is kind of the perfect movie to watch after watching No Time to Die?
No.
Really? Why?
Why would you think it'd be the perfect film to watch after?
Because everything that preceded this movie means absolutely nothing.
I guess, sort of. Yeah.
It is kind of like at the end of No Time to Die, and again, we've covered spoilers many times. I don't think that I'm shocking anyone when I say that James Bond dies, and at the end of the film it says James Bond will return, and I want Sean Connery to show up in the next James Bond movie and be like, I don't know what you guys were talking about. It's amazing. You could omit on Her Majesty's Secret Service and call Diamonds Are Forever a complete follow-up to You Only Live Twice, and not even...
I think that was the idea.
Which makes total sense, but the thing is that there is still a whole bunch of George Lazenby in the middle of that sandwich.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, and if we are continuity hounds about what's going to happen moving forward, who's going to be the new Bond, how do they explain it? Are they going to retcon it again? What are they going to do? The thing is that when everyone is fussing and fawning over this, they've already done it. This movie did it already.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, technically it's a sequel, if you want. I mean, they don't mention Tracy by name, but they certainly make the point that he's got a vendetta against Blofeld in the beginning. But,
no more of a vendetta than an arch villain versus a hero. Like, there is no emotional stake to it. Like, he's a little bit more intense in the opening, which we'll get to.
But that intensity is only there in the pre-title sequence. It's not there when he's following any of his guys through the film.
No.
But before we jump into that, I would mention that currently, as of today, or as of Monday when the last receipts came in, No Time to Die is currently at $450 million.
Okay.
Pretty good. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, but what was the...
It's and again... in China and Australia coming up, so...
Oh, wow. And Australia would be a big market. They love George Lazenby.
Ha, ha, ha.
Sorry.
I know. That was a great story, though, by the way.
But yeah, so... really good numbers. Still, it's not making its money back, right?
No, I think. I mean, I was impressed that it still made like another 100 or so in overseas markets over the weekend as well. So maybe I think it'll beat Casino and Quantum, which finished in the 590 range.
Oh wow!
So yeah, I think it might get around 700 maybe. So,
okay,
it could do that. I'll see.
But still not making its money back.
That assuming that we're correct, because I didn't think about the fact that. Okay, so MGM is 464 in the hole. If they get to keep half the ticket stubs, then that means it would have to make 928. But since Eon doesn't have to pay for these movies, I don't know what Eon's deal is. Is it like, do they get first dollar gross, or do they have to wait until it breaks even before they get their profit? I have no idea. So technically, it might have to make even more than 928, because if Eon wants to take their cut before the studio breaks even. But again, it doesn't really matter that the studio breaks even, because if the Amazon deal is approved, then the people who lost money on it are set to get $8.5 billion. So it's not like they're losing anything per se.
Yeah. Well, there is a tagline at the end of the film: James Bond will return. It doesn't matter whether or not this movie makes money. James Bond has lost money before.
Yeah, maybe.
It's had lowest grosses. My beloved License to Kill is no fair weather. But yeah. So with Diamonds Are Forever, 1971, I noticed we still got Harry Saltzman.
Yes. He has two more, this movie and then two more.
Okay. So we're looking, and also the Saltzman's sort of showing.
Yeah. That'll be a great topic for a show as well, diving into the differences between Cubby and Harry.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also have a soft spot for Harry because he's Canadian, isn't he? He was. His family still reigns on. Canadian.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, no. Canadians have this thing about celebrities, even no matter how tangential. It's just like, oh, no, you know what? Alan Thicke, Canadian. So anyway. Yeah, no, it's interesting, but you can see it. And there is an elephant in this movie. And I was like, oh, Harry.
Yeah.
So how would you like to, you don't seem to find this as an engrossing film in terms of the transition and the sort of more commercial direction of James Bond and how the continuity doesn't necessarily mean a lick.
Well, I mean, just to get a little background on that, the reason they did this, and even in the advertisements for the movie, they kept making comments about how we're getting back to normal or back to what Bond is all about. And frankly, I put this all at the feet of George Lazenby. I think this is 100% his fault, because he very publicly announced before they'd even finished filming On Her Majesty's that he wasn't going to come back for another movie. He then shows up to the press junket looking like a hippie, talking about how he'd rather do art films like Easy Rider with Dennis Hopper and stuff like that, and kind of bagging on the franchise. And it's like, dude, you would never see that today. It's like, you got to sell the movie. I think the closest we've come to an actor bagging on their own movie in recent years was Shia LaBeouf bagging on the fourth Indiana Jones movie during the press junket, which of course soured his relationship with Spielberg, because you really got to sell the movie. That's like arguably the most boring aspect of the job for the actors, because you got to sit there and just listen to these asinine questions all the time.
But it is part of your job.
Right. And the thing is that since he was going to be the first new Bond actor, they really needed to sell that movie, and they need to convince the audience to have goodwill that, no, it's okay that Connery's not doing it anymore. This guy will do it for us. But when he shows up like that and has no enthusiasm, has already quit and bagging on it, it's like, well, then that's also why the movie didn't make as much money, because a bunch of people figure, well, the casual fans are like, should we really go see this movie if even the guy in the lead role doesn't like it? And so
it sounds like you're describing Daniel Craig.
Right, but then the United Artists came along, because they had since merged with MGM, and they're the ones who actually insisted on bringing back Connery. And they said, look, we'll pay him whatever he wants. And it ended up being $1,250,000. And the thinking was dollars. So the thinking was, if we get him to come back as he's the audience's Bond, we'll get some goodwill back with the fans, and then do a better job at whoever we transition to later.
Do you mind if I smoke?
Go for it. I'm not in the same room. So once they did that transition, I found it odd that they didn't bother trying to continue the story, because the plot was originally, if Lazenby had stayed on, it was going to be him going like on his own rogue vendetta against Blofeld to avenge the murder of Tracy.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, the reason Telly Savalas didn't reprise the role of Blofeld was because Lazenby wasn't coming back, and then the actress who played Irma Bunt, Ilsa Steppa, had passed away. So he's like, yeah, okay, I'm done. But I think they still could have continued the story if they wanted to. I mean, the franchise under the Broccoli's, they clearly do not believe in the mantra, a rising tide raises all ships. It's like if you bring in a new actor, or I mean, not a new actor, but a new director, new writers, if you just write a better script around whatever the idea was that people didn't like, you can make it better. Like, there's no doubt that as much as I like No Time to Die, that they clearly shafted Blofeld and Spectre because the fans didn't like that last movie. Same thing with Quantum. Oh, we're going to shaft Quantum because fans didn't respond to that, so we'll just kind of do this half-assed retcon. So it seems like they're doing the same thing here with Diamonds, where, oh, they didn't like the last movie, so we'll sort of homage it by saying, oh, well, of course Bond's going to want revenge against Blofeld, so we'll only tease that in the pre-title. The rest of it feels like an impartial James Bond adventure, which happens to feature Blofeld.
Well, we'll get into that. I can't wait to have the blow by blow. But yeah, no, it is something that is, when we are looking down the gun barrel of a new James Bond adventure, the No Time to Die is done. It's over. It's in the Pantheon. It is now part of the box set that we will all eventually purchase. But now we're looking at what is next. And I hate to say that, but it's like, I don't care what James Bond shows up and says, this never happened to the other fella. I don't care. It's a James Bond movie. And so I appreciate the box set that is Craig, but in the larger scheme of things, James Bond will return. Daniel Craig won't, but James Bond will.
As has always been the case.
Yes. And so I'm anticipatory, and this kind of movie, when it goes back to what it did before, this is a much derided film. I take glee in how much of a whoopee cushion this is. And I am, yes, talking about Crispin Glover's father at the end, who obviously was killed by a whoopee cushion.
When I was watching this movie, I was literally 18 minutes into the film, and I'd already forgotten what scene opened up after the main titles. Because I'm like, wait, because of the way it's done is just so different, and it's like, but okay. Shall we jump into it, or?
Yes, let's. All
right, so we get our gun barrel logo, which is nice to get back to a classic gun barrel logo after taking our little detour with Craig for the last 5 weeks.
Still the old gun barrel that Sean Connery had done for the previous film. No new gun barrel, just stock footage.
Yes. So we open up with this pre-title, which I think is arguably the worst pre-title sequence in the entire franchise, because the choreography is terrible. The cinematography is terrible, because they're trying to hide the fact that it's Bond at first, and you can hear what is obviously a really bad voiceover job. And they're doing these rack zooms and stuff where he's like grabbing people and shaking them, and or like there's a really bad shot of a guy at a casino in Cairo, and he's got looking at his cards, and he's like, hit me, and of course Bond takes it out and punches it, and I'm like, oh god. So it's just very odd the way they staged it, and I wonder if it was deliberate that what the opening shot is actually in like what looks like Japan again, inside this Oriental like dojo. And it's like, oh, it's making me think of You Only Live Twice immediately, as opposed to the last movie, because that's the last place we saw Blofelds in Japan. So they do this thing that goes on for several minutes, or not several minutes, but and he finally ends up at this weird lab-like compound where Blofeld has got a bunch of body doubles.
Oh, but wait, there's also, you forgot, I apologize, this is misogyny. But it's a James Bond movie, so it's dismissed. There is the part where when he actually does say, the name's Bond, James Bond, my name is Bond. Not a very good delivery of it, but then he goes and it's a lady. And so he thinks, or the audience thinks, it's going to be some sort of seduction, and it becomes quite an assault with the removing of the bikini top and the strangulation and whatnot, and there is some 70s side boob. But, yeah, it is of its time.
He also looks very kind of checked out a bit.
Yo, he's very checked out throughout the film.
Probably the oldest 40-year-old I've ever seen. And he's got the toupee, which is like really obvious, and it's just so, it felt very dull. And coming off that bad choreography and cinematography for it, and then we move into this lab where Blofeld's got all these doubles being made for him. And Bond comes in and, he kills one of the doubles. They get in a fight, and there's this awkward moment where him and Blofeld are on opposite sides of the operating table, and Blofeld shouts to the two guards, "Kill him!" And Blofeld's just standing there, kind of ramrod straight, and Bond just kind of looks around at these guys, and Blofeld's still standing there doing nothing, and he's got all these knives next to him. But of course, he waits till after Bond kills the two guys before he tries to stab him. So of course, it's not going to work. Bond straps him down onto the operating table thing, and then pushes him into what I guess is the hot. Whatever
Mud?
The mud or something to kill him, and he's like, "Oh, better luck next time, Blofeld." And you see Blofeld.
No, welcome to hell, Blofeld.
That's right, and not as angry as he should be if it's supposed to be a continuation of the last film. Certainly not as angry as he was a scene earlier when he was beating up all those people and grabbing them and choking them out. And then,
how hard is it just to say for Tracy?
Yeah, and so
that's it. That's all you got to change.
And the cat's got the diamond necklace, and then we bleed into the main titles where it's like, oh, okay, they brought back Guy Hamilton and Shirley Bassey, probably hoping to recreate some Goldfinger magic. But no. So good song though, by the way.
Not my favorite. Not my favorite.
Yeah, I like this one. I like the tune for it as well. So we come out of the song, and Bond is at M's office, and he's talking to this guy about this issue with diamond. They think there's this big diamond smuggling operation going on because the prices of diamonds are basically being dumped onto the market because somebody's stockpiling them to drive down the price and then swoop in and buy all these excess amount of diamonds. And the guy's talking about how 80% of the world's diamonds come from South Africa. And while he's explaining this, you get to see all the steps in this diamond smuggling operation, which is kind of cool. So it was cool. Yeah, it starts with the miners, and some of them are hiding the diamonds in their shoes or in their mouths, and some of them aren't even trying to hide the fact that they're doing this. They're looking at their buddies while they're doing it, and the other guy looks at him, and he's not going to report him, whatever. Then this one miner who gets the diamonds goes to the dentist, and the dentist is doing some work, and he pops the diamond out, puts it in a little box, and then gives the guy some cash that he has folded up in a little cloth. And then the next miner comes in, and he's like, open wide, which is pretty funny. The dentist then goes out to what is supposed to be the desert of South Africa, but you could totally tell this is Palm Desert. So he goes out there, and he's supposed to be meeting this helicopter, but instead he meets our two henchmen in the film, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, played by Peter Smith and Bruce Glover. They're this gay couple who are hitmen, and they're very quirky to say the least. The dentist is like, "Oh, where's this guy? Oh, he couldn't make it."
Okay, hang on a second. First of all, for those who have not seen the movie, Putter Smith looks like Rolf the dog, and from the Muppets, and oh my stars,
a jazz player, too, really good one.
Yeah, no, an incredible musician. I don't mean to take away. I'm just saying, if you were to look at him, he is the definition of hangdog. He's a murderer. And then Crispin Glover, not Julian Glover, Crispin Glover's dad. What's his name?
Bruce Glover.
Bruce Glover, pardon me.
Crispin Glover's father.
Yes. Incredibly quirky and awesome. Amazing.
Yeah, can you believe that Putter Smith was only 30 years old in this movie?
I can. It was the 70s. It was 1971. Everyone who was 30 looked that way.
I am utterly fascinated by how the aging thing changes. It's I'm 33, and I'm looking at Putter Smith, and the guy looks like he's 45 or 47 or something in this movie. Not shaming or anything. I just thought it looks really neat.
No, it does. And also, nowadays, if you happen to have that hairline, most people aren't going to grow it out. It's just not in the style.
Yeah, so the dentist is there, Dr. Tyneman, and he's got the diamonds, and he's like, "Where's this guy? Well, they're not going to hear." So he hands it over to them instead. And then as he's turning to leave, Mr. Kidd pretends to have a toothache, and he's like, "Oh, it's my wisdom teeth. I never had them taken out." And Mr. Wint is like, "Would you mind?" And then Dr. Tynan says, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." And we have Mr. Wint holding this black scorpion that he got, and he drops it down the dentist's back. I guess the thinking is that if the body happens to be found in the desert, they want it to look like an accident instead of just, shooting him because they're in the middle of nowhere. But okay. So
It's quirky James Bond death. It happens throughout the film.
It does.
There are many questions.
Apparently, they were originally going to have Mr. Winton Kid shove the scorpion down his throat, but they thought that would be too, would not get past the British censors. So I bet that would have been interesting to see. But I kind of like the way they do it here because it's actually kind of funny. And
sounds very Fleming.
Yes, so they hide the body behind these rocks. The helicopter lands. The guy's like, where's Joe or Dr. Timon or whatever? And they're like, oh, he got bitten by the bug. and he gives them what they think is the diamonds. Helicopter takes off, but of course they swapped it with a bomb, so the helicopter blows up. And then it was just really funny where Mr. Kidd says, if man were meant to fly, and Mr. Wint's like, they would
have given him wings, Mr. Kidd. And then they hold hands and they walk down the lane.
And it's odd that they're making that joke, considering that they're going to be flying on an airplane themselves later in the movie. But okay.
I think it's just one of those cold-hearted things that you say after you blow up a helicopter.
Yeah, so at the end of this whole sequence, we cut back to M's office, and the guy's finishing explaining how this whole smuggling operation has been working. And they're like, okay, we've arrested the smuggler, Peter Franks. He was supposed to go to Holland. Bond, you're going to go undercover as him to intercept the diamonds. And he's like, okay. So he goes to Holland, and he's tasked with meeting Tiffany Case. And we see that Mr. Winton and Mr. Kidd are already here. They've gone to see this sweet old lady who's like a school teacher for all these kids. And she's helping them out with the diamonds, and sure enough, they don't show her getting killed, but her body is fished out of the river. And Mr. Kidd's taking pictures of it from the bridge, and Mr. Wint is like, oh, the kids did, or Mr. Kidd says, well, the kids did want pictures of the river, and Mr. Wint's like, oh, right on you, Mr. Kidd. And they go to walk across the bridge, and you have these tourists in the boat going by, and the tourist is talking about the history of this one bridge, how there were these two sisters who wanted to see each other every day, but they didn't have enough money to finish building the bridge, which is why it's really skinny in the middle. It's just kind of weird. And then she's like, oh, if you look off to your left, and that's when you see them fishing the body out. So it's like really quirky stuff. So Bond shows up. He goes up the elevator to meet Tiffany Case. He's posing, of course, as Peter Franks.
You skipped over Bruce, Bernard Lee. One of he's looking ashen lately. He was looking old. And then it again, but you know what? Lois Maxwell looking foxy at the border as Sean Connery, takes the place, not Sean Connery. Sorry, it's not a James Bond movie. It is literally Sean Connery collecting a paycheck. So I get confused. I don't call him James Bond in this movie. So James Bond goes and swaps with Franks, Mr. Franks, the smuggler, and then crosses the border, and they take a hydrofoil, a hovercraft across to go to.
Moneypenny says, "Oh, if you could," because he asks, "What do you want me to bring you back?" And she's like, "A diamond with a ring, with a ring on it." And he's like, "How about a tulip?" And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll take that."
Yeah, but the thing is, and it struck me because, again, emotionally impacting James Bond movies, I was like, the last time I saw you, you were at my wedding. You know what happened to Tracy. Why are you hitting on me? This is wholly inappropriate, Moneypenny.
Right. So he goes to meet Tiffany Case, as I mentioned. He goes to Holland. Winton Kid killed the lady. So he goes up to meet Tiffany, and they have this back and forth, and she's trying on these different wigs, and he's trying to be the same suave womanizer guys before, and it's not really working. And Tiffany's not really interested anyway. She's like, "Wait until after we get the diamonds to Los Angeles, mister." And he's like, "Well, where are they?" He's like, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you that easily," or whatever. So so he kind of
hang on. Jill St. John, Foxy.
No.
Not a very good character.
No, there's not much to this character.
No.
Bond kind of strikes out on this thing, so he leaves, and then sure enough, the real Peter Franks shows up, and Bond gets a phone call from Q of all people, telling him that, and actually Bond compliments Q in this instance for this, because the gadget, because he used the voice changer thing to get into the house to begin with, and he's like, "Wow, Q, that's really fantastic, really genius." But once Q tells him that the real Peter Franks has escaped, Bond is just like, he just totally leaves Q hanging. So he races back to the apartment, and he does this weird thing where he's standing outside and he's pretending like he's making out with somebody it's kind of weird. And then Peter Franks goes to buzz himself in. Bond runs up there and puts on this phony accent and pretends to be almost like the valet or something. They go in the elevator, they're going up, and then Bond, he does this neat move where he elbows the glass on the side of the elevator. They start fighting, and this fight goes on for a while, and Tiffany eventually hears what's going on and comes out of her room and sees all this, and Bond eventually gets out of the elevator and she carries a lot of that, does a lot of that in the movie. She carries out, and Bond gets a hold of a fire extinguisher and just sprays Franks with it and hits him again, and she's like, "Oh my God, what did you do?" He's like, "Oh, I guess I killed him," and they drag his body into her apartment real quick, and Bond does this little sleight of hand thing where he swaps Franks' ID with his own, and she checks the body for the ID, and it says that it's James Bond, but with a little Playboy bunny symbol on it, with like a key, as if he's got some.
Oh no, no, it's like from the Playboy Club, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, and didn't Sean Connery at the time, like one of his only interviews for one of the Bond films was with Playboy magazine, so
yeah,
there was some sort of nod.
Yeah, there's a nod.
It was of its time. Although it's one of the weird things in terms of this meshing over period of James Bond movies where I was like, that's very Roger Moore before Roger Moore.
Yeah, and then the fact that she knows apparently who James Bond is, because she has this really strong reaction to it. It's like, you just killed James Bond, and how they could be in trouble. They need to cover this up, and Bond's like, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of it or whatever. So they takes the body on the coffin. They're gonna fly it back to. They're gonna fly to Vegas. Initially, they're supposed to go to Los Angeles, but they fly to Vegas, and Felix is there to meet him at the airport, undercover. And he checks the body. He's like, look, I know the diamonds are in the coffin, but where are they? And Bond's like, elementary, Felix.
What does that mean?
I don't know what that means. It's like, well,
that's the.
Yeah,
like I don't know. Should I look it up?
I don't know. So apparently a switch happens, but we don't really see it happen, because at the same time that he's talking to Felix about how the diamonds are, inside the coffin with the body, we see this car drive up at this hearse from the funeral home, Slumber Incorporated, with three guys. One, Mark Lawrence, who's played a lot of little gangster roles like this. One, Sid Haig, from the House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil Reject movie, the famous character there. He's there. And
hang on. Before we move on. Alimentary, referring to nourishment or sustenance. In this instance, I would assume that alimentary means that the diamonds are in Peter Frank's stomach.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that too, or something along those lines.
Really? I always thought it was the butt. Anyway, you were saying.
So they take the coffin and they load it in the hearse, and Bond goes with them, and they're driving out in the desert, and they're like, oh, sorry about your brother, Mr. Franks. And this one guy's
I got a brother.
I got a brother. He's like, a small world. It's just really weird. So they pull up to this funeral home, which is in Henderson, and they load the coffin, and they're putting it in there, and you have arguably the fastest cremation in the movies. Because they start the machine, Bond walks into the other room, they sit down, there's an awkward pause, and then the guy walks in with the urn, and they've already gotten the diamonds out of the body and everything, and they give it to him. And Mr. Slumber tells him where the arrangement is. So he goes outside, walks through the little mausoleum, passes Mr. Winton, Mr. Kidd, who are pretending to tend to a flower arrangement. Bond puts the urn with all the diamonds inside this open crypt, and then Mr. Winton, Mr. Kidd strike him on the head, drag him away to burn him alive inside the crematorium. While Shady Tree, a comedian from the White Casino, shows up and picks up the diamonds, but he apparently notices that they're fakes. And Bond is luckily rescued by Shady Tree and Mr. Slumber. And it's kind of weird. The way they're talking to him when they open the coffin, it's almost as if they just tapped him on the shoulder while he was having a drink or something. They're not even going to acknowledge the fact that he was being burned alive or on the about to be inside. They're being very nonchalant about it. Like, hey, where's the diamonds? These aren't real. And Bond's like, oh, well, where's the money? That's not real. And even though Bond is still holding the paper that supposedly has the money in it, he doesn't give him back the money, even though he claims it's fake, part of his ruse. He just says, like, you give me the money and then I'll give you the diamonds. And he just casually walks out of the funeral home, which I always thought was a bit.
I was trying to reconcile that interaction, and I was like, is he asking for more money?
Because there's two ways you can read it when he says the real money. Either he thinks he got counterfeit, which if he thought that, he would have just left it there as part of the ruse, or real
But
money.
then he goes to the casino later and he uses that money from that envelope, and they're like, no, his money's good here.
Well, I know that the money's good. It's not fake. He just, like they say, where's the diamonds? So he says, give me the real money, which is, like I was saying, is the second interpretation of it, which is this isn't enough money. Like, you want to give me real money, come and see me. But it was still very weird because the fact that Slumber and Shady Tree don't even acknowledge the weirdness that he's just been in this crematorium. It's like, okay. So Bond leaves.
Well, and then Bond does say, it's like, well, you wouldn't burn up this much money.
Right. Yeah, so he leaves. He goes to the casino. We find out through some small talk there that this Mr. White guy has not been seen for like 3 years. And he's up in the penthouse or whatnot. Bond's playing at the craps table with the money, and one of the pit boss notices that Bond is putting like rather large bets. So he signals Bert Saxby, who's Mr. White's right-hand man, the casino floor manager. He goes over to Bond, and all Bond has to do is show him the envelope from Slumber Incorporated. And he turns to the pit boss, and Saxby says, "Oh, Mr. Frank's credit is good here." So like, okay, so they keep playing cards, or he's playing, and up comes Plenty O'Toole, played by Lana Wood, who was actually apparently dating Sean Connery during this filming of this movie.
Well, and the chemistry is palpable.
Yeah, so she's there, kind of like a good luck charm. You're winning a lot of money, and he gives her a $5,000 tip, basically, and invites her back up to the room. And in this scene, there's actually a deleted scene from this segment with Sammy Davis Jr. at the table as well, which I thought they should have left in the movie. It's like, come on, it's right there, but they didn't. So Bond, he takes her up to the room, and the gangsters show up again. They grab Plenty O'Toole and throw her out the window, and she lands in the pool. And Bond's like, "Oh, impeccable aim," or whatever. And you have Mark Lawrence saying, "I didn't know there was a pool down there." So Bond smacks the guy, but then the Sid Haig guy pulls out his gun, and they take the money.
Sid Haig guy. Yeah, no, it does look like Sid Haig.
They take the money and they leave. Bond figures, oh, shit. So he goes back down towards the casino, and we see that Shady Tree, the comedian, who's a really bad comedian, I might add. He's like a cheap insult comic. He goes into a makeup room and is confronted by Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. And for some reason, they shortened this scene because there's a deleted extended version on the DVD which shows them actually killing him, where they make suggestions for how he can improve his act. And Mr. Wint pulls out a gun, shoots it, and you have the little cloth pop out that says "bang." And he's like, then Mr. Kidd's got like the fake flower that sprays water. And Shady Tree's like, I see all this sugar in the book, you kids, get out of here. And then Mr. Wint pulls the trigger on the fake gun again, but then there's a real bullet in it this time, which kills him, which I thought should have been left in the movie, but whatever. So after they kill him, they go outside.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah, so they go outside the makeup room, and they get confronted by Bert Saxby, who's like, I hope you didn't kill him. The diamonds, turns out they were fake. And they're like, oh, and Mr. Kidd is like, oh, such a shame, because they've already, killed him. Bond
dispatched, yes.
Yeah, so Bond sees that Shady Tree is dead, so he doesn't really have a lead. So he goes back in the casino. He meets Tiffany Case. They decide to spend the night together. Strangely, he doesn't even acknowledge, like Plenty O'Toole, yeah, she landed in the pool. She was all right, but he doesn't bother trying to find her again or to make sure she's like, all right, or isn't going to go report this to the cops or whatever. She just kind of disappears at this point for quite a while. Yeah, it was kind of weird. So
I never thought about the fate of Plenty O'Toole until the fate of Plenty O'Toole is revealed.
Yeah, so they go up into the room. They're spending the night together, and Bond tells her that you're going to pick up the real diamonds at Circus. And we cut to Circus, and it's arguably the worst way I've seen the inside of a casino filmed for a movie. It looks like a really dark, dank cave. In a place I wouldn't want to be. It's not colorful for a place called Circus. It's just very weird. And
and also it's got like the black backgrounds around it, and so it almost looks like a Star Trek set. It's weird.
It does. It looks very odd. And then the elephant is just being walked through the floor on the
Harry wanted his elephants.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we have that. So Tiffany's going through to pick up the money. She's playing cards, and the dealer kind of flashes her this one fake card that's written on it. Says, go play the balloons. So she goes over to the balloon game where you use like a water gun to try and pop the balloon, and she does a terrible job at it, but she gets the top prize anyway, which is this big stuffed like animal that's got the diamonds in it. And this little kid's there giving her crap about it. And just, hey, mister, she barely did. What are you doing? And he's like, shut up, kid, and let it, drop it, type of thing.
What are these children doing in a casino?
I know. It's like, this isn't like. Yeah, so That's very weird. So she leaves and goes into this. For some reason, she sneaks into this sideshow, which is
no, because she's being tailed by 30 of Felix Leiter's best CIA agents.
Oh, that's right. Because Bond greets Felix and he assures him that it's going to be fine. And sure enough, it's not. She ducks into this side room where there's this weird presentation going on where we're going to have this woman in a cage, a bamboo cage, get transformed into a gorilla. Yeah, that's not iffy for what you might be saying racially about that, but okay. So she's.
I don't even think this isn't even of its time. I think that if we were in 1971, we would be like, I guess that's what people in the 30s thought.
Yeah, so she decides that because she can tell she's being tailed by all these people, that she doesn't trust, the Peter Franks guy anymore. So she decides that she's going to take the diamonds to the next guy to hand it off. She does. She then goes home and finds Bond at her house. This was actually Kirk Douglas's house out in Palm Springs. It's actually a pretty cool place. So he finds Bond there, and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing? Yeah, you gave me the fake diamonds. What the hell's going on?" And she's like, "And why is my wig in the pool?" And she takes a closer look, and we see that it's Plenty O'Toole, who's been weighted down and drowned. This was seen as well for some reason, where they actually did show Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd killing her because she did see, precisely because of what she witnessed, and that she was a bit too close to the action and was the next person to get the diamonds anyway. So I thought it was rather odd that they deleted this scene, and I'm not sure if it was as clear to people that was her in the pool, because it is admittedly a bit blurred because of the water.
Well, I think one of the reasons, I don't know. Maybe at the time they edited out a bunch of the Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wint stuff because of the nature of their relationship.
Perhaps. Yeah, that might be it. So,
it's a possibility, but also in my mind, I have a tenuous grasp of where Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wint, who do they work for? Do they work for Blofeld?
Yes.
Is there ever a scene with Blofeld and Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wint?
No, but when Blofeld puts Bond in the elevator and really it makes a point about putting Bond in that specific elevator. When he gets down to the bottom, Wint and Kidd are there to pick him up.
Ah, yes, okay.
So,
but that's really the only indication. Aside from that, they're just they're Laurel and Hardy with murder.
Right. So at this point, she knows that that Bond is not Peter Franks, so she demands to know what's going on. And he kind of tells her, he's like, "Come on, take me to the person who you gave the fake diamonds to." So they go. It's Bert Saxby, of course, and so they start following him. And this is when Tiffany tells him that Mr. White lives in the or Willard White, I should say, lives in the penthouse of his casino. It hasn't been seen for like 3 years, and Bert Saxby runs everything, and he's got the stuffed animal with the diamonds. So Bond tails him to the airport. From there, from the airport, Mr. Saxby pulls over at this gas station, and this is a really weird scene where Bond tells Tiffany, who's driving her, I should say, the Mustang Mach 1, to pull up and block him so he can't pull out. And she's like, okay. So she blocks him, and she does this funny little sassy bit where they're, get out of the way. She's like, not until I get the gas line or whatever. So while this is going on...
Wait, you missed the best line!
What?
You keep laying on that tutor, Charlie, and you'll get a shot in the mouth!
Yeah, so while she's doing this, Bond just opens the back of the guy's van to get in. And the car directly behind the van, the driver doesn't seem to notice at all that, hey, some guy just snuck into your car.
Tiffany Case is right over there, and she's blocking up everything. She's smoking hot. I don't know what to do. I am looking at Jill St. John.
You still would be able to see that in your periphery.
I understand that. I'm being facetious.
I know. So Tiffany then pulls off. She's like, because once she notices that Bond gets in the back, she's like, "Sorry, man, I asked for different gas. You messed up. Now you're whatever she says, like next time or whatever." So she drives out of the parking lot and lets the van pass her on the main road. Then she follows them, and this van ends up driving out into the desert at this Tetronics laboratory. Mm-hmm. And she went outside of the perimeter fence. While the van parks in the parking garage underground, Bond gets out of the van. He sneaks inside.
Like with an elevator.
Yeah, it's like a car with an elevator that takes it underground. Bond ends up, which feels like this whole segment, by the way, is almost like an ode to the old Area 51 type stuff, because you have a lot of Air Force bases out there, and people in their conspiracies say that there's big giant elevators in the desert that go down to these massive cavernous labs and all that kind of stuff.
I accept where you're coming from. However, watching it this time around, I was like, has this been established at all?
What?
this laboratory moon base thing.
Oh, like, I mean, in terms of why he's going there?
Yeah.
No, Bond's just following him, and this is where he goes. And the reason he goes there is because he's handing off the diamonds. Because we find out when Bond gets Bond gets a lab coat on, he lies saying he's from Section G or whatever. He gets in there,
right,
and he finds out that they're using the diamonds for this satellite, and that they have this scientist who's apparently the world's leading expert in laser refraction. And Bond's little audio tape thing sitting on the counter, and he kind of swipes it a bit, and then he outstays his welcome, so he leaves. And then the real guy Bond was posing as comes in. They realize they've been duped, and they sound the alarm. And for some reason, Bond goes into this room where it looks like they're trying to recreate the moon landing. And it's like, okay. And the guy on the PA system says, "Get him, you fools!" And so Bond steals this moon buggy, which is just there.
Oh my God! What happened? Jesus! How did we get to this part of the plot? What happened?
I don't know. So he drives out through the side wall. And at first, one of those big boats start following him. As I call them, boats. Cars in the 70s were like giant boats because of how huge they are. And for some reason, the car inexplicably falls apart in ways that it wouldn't fall apart just because it's driving off-road. And eventually you have these like tri-wheel dune buggies start following Bond out in the desert. It gets to the point with a silly chase where Bond off-screen jumps out of the dune, outside of the moon buggy. The guys on the tri-wheels keep following him. Bond knocks one of the guys off their tri-wheeler, takes off, drives outside the perimeter fence, gets picked up by Tiffany. He's like, "Come on, let's get out of here." And if you see a scientist asking, blah, 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 just tell him that we're here to see the view, or some weird kind of excuse. So they take off, and the 3 security guards whose car had crashed earlier in this desert chase see Tiffany taking off in the car, and they call ahead to inform the sheriff, which is a smart move on their part. Yes. So they get back to Las Vegas, and the sheriff sees Bond and Tiffany, and we get into this very odd car chase where, on the one hand, they're driving down Las Vegas Boulevard on the strip, and eventually the reason why I mentioned it's odd is because there's a segment where they get to this parking lot. And it goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes of them just zigzagging between all the different parking spots and the lanes trying to get, and you have the cars crashing and stuff, and eventually they use this trailer truck for her car to jump over to get out of the parking lot. They then find themselves cornered by the sheriff himself, and they drive into this dead end, and that's where we have the stunt.
Okay. And yes, no, I understand we're getting to the car tilt, but before you get to the car tilt, I did appreciate this particular car chase, mashup, crash derby, whatever. I appreciated that it was practical. I liked the camera setup for it. It was obvious that there were drivers, and it was sort of a figure 8 course within the parking lot. I never thought that I would be advocating for a parking lot car chase in a James Bond movie, but because it was practical and it was from above and it had the Mustang and the cop cars are crashing all over the place, I thought it was a pretty cool practical car chase, no matter how ridiculous. And also when they go back to when they show Connery and Jill St. John sitting there and she's like, "Bah!" and like, oh, it's so terrible. And then they show the people following. It's awful. But yes, anyway, so they go through the alley. It's a dead end. The sheriff has got them dead to rights.
Yes, but there's this ramp there, and Bond drives half the car up the ramp, tilting the car on its right side. It goes through this narrow exit through the alley, and because they had a continuity error where the car was leaning on its opposite side when they filmed the exit from the alley, they put this little clunky insert shot of the car like inverting on itself, which would not be possible driving through this really narrow alley. And with this weird expression on Tiffany, like, ah. And of course, when the sheriff tries to do the same move, no sooner than he hits the ramp, his car flips upside down.
Well, he's not as good as James Bond.
Exactly. So I did appreciate, though, that because she's driving he has the Mustang Mach 1 that's a lot more agile when it was taking turns throughout this chase as opposed to the cop cars. So they get out of the alley, and apparently that's the end of the chase, because I guess that was all the cop cars in Las Vegas, and the sheriff couldn't use his radio to so that was a little weird. So the chase is over. Bond and Tiffany are back in like the hotel suite, and it's this interesting bed setup, which is like surrounded by an aquarium, and she's asking Bond if he'll be able to help her. He's like, "Oh, I might be able to swing 30 years for her in prison," because obviously Felix and all his guys and Bond know that she's a diamond smuggler. And she's like, 30 years? And he's like, "Oh, I'll talk about it. Maybe we'll get out of it." So then Felix interrupts them and, comes inside, and presumably Bond is, he updates them about what they discovered out in the desert, which ain't much. He gives the tape to Felix, and when Felix sees her, she's like, he was talking about how he wants to send her to the, I'm going to send her to the hotel with a lifetime checkup. Yeah, like send her to jail. Okay. And then he sees her, and he kind of stops short of that. And Bond says, "Oh, you can go, Felix." And Felix reminds him that he's got guys outside the room on both exits. So Felix leaves, and then Bond decides he's going to leave
the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, he's going to leave the old-fashioned way. He goes out the window onto the roof. He gets on top of the elevator, which goes up the side of the building, rides it up to as high as he can. He then gets out this nifty gadget from Q to basically scale the sides of the building.
Well, it's like a piton gun for mountain climbing, and I appreciated the reference to the mountain climbing with the James Bond.
Yeah, so he uses this to get up to access the penthouse. Finds himself in this odd room, which is like the bathroom, and it's got all these telephones, different voice boxes in there, and then you hear Willard White on the PA system inviting Bond in or whatever, and so Bond gets up off it, comes inside the main room, but he sees, instead of Willard White, there's two Blofelds. And it's kind of odd because they play the scene as if Bond only has opportunity to shoot one of them. And like, oh, yeah, such a predicament, Mr. Bond. And I'm thinking, you could just like shoot both of them and be done with it. But
no, but he only has the piton gun. He only has one shot.
Yeah, I guess so. So he walks in, and you have the glass like floor with all the big world map on the ground with all the models of where all of Willard White's like oil rigs are and the various companies, and Blofeld's. He doesn't really spell out what his evil plan is. He just says that, yes, he has Willard White is kept in a safe place, and he's, being used to basically he's using Willard White's anonymity and preference for that to be able to hide up in this penthouse and have access to all of his entourage
resources and whatnot. But wouldn't it have been glorious if he had said, "The plan, Mr. Bond, is to launch from Baja"? No one would believe him. Oh, anyway, so there's this big map, and so James Bond is there with, who froze? Was it who froze? You or me?
I'm not sure. It just went out for a second, but I still heard it.
Okay, so there's the big map.
Yeah, so there's a big map, and like I was saying, it was funny that when Bond mentioned to Felix at one point, Felix, you realize that this place isn't the actual White House, and he's not the president. We can just go up there and talk to him. And it's like, nah, Bond, I can get you in to see the president, but not Willard White, which frankly doesn't make any sense. And obviously, for those who don't know, the whole Willard White thing is based on Howard Hughes, because he was living in a penthouse of a casino at this time and had not been seen for years, and was very beneficial in arranging them being able to shut down the Vegas Strip to shoot the car chase and stuff. And so I thought it was weird that they're shoehorning the whole Willard White thing. They're using it in the narrative, which makes me wonder at which point when writing the script did they know they were going to be getting Howard Hughes to do all this stuff for them, since they clearly put the Willard White character in the movie for this purpose. But that's another story. So Bond is, he sees all the map thing in the floor, and Blofeld's being kind of discreet about what the plan is, and Bond makes the choice to pick up, he kind of sidles over to the couch where the cat is, and he picks up Blofeld's cat and he tosses it to the other Blofeld on the couch, shoots that Blofeld with the Petrie gun, and then the other Blofeld pulls out the gun, and apparently the act of throwing the cat was supposed to help smoke out the real. What was it?
Okay, so James Bond looks at the cat and he kicks the cat. The cat responds by jumping to its owner, which obviously had to be the real Blofeld. So when the other cat comes in, that's why Blofeld says, "Right idea, Mr. Bond, wrong cat." Okay. Now, no, it's very strenuous to get to that conclusion, and that is what I've heard. The only problem is that I've lived with cats before, and that is not how cats work.
Yeah, no. So Blofeld then goes to open the wall safe to get the tape that he's got, which I thought Bond swiped the tape when he was at the lab.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, and
no, he looked at it in the lab, but he puts it back because Guy, your shields, and he sort of kicks him out. Why are you snooping around? But then he recognizes the March's tape again in the office, and I see, yeah.
Okay, so that's what it was. So Bond, so Blofeld gets the tape out of the wall safe. He puts the gun in him and tells Bond to go out the elevator. So with little other choice, Bond goes into the elevator and he assumes that the floor is going to open below him, which is funny because and the reason he especially thinks that is because Blofeld specifically says, "Press L, Mr. Bond. L is the first letter in the word lobby." Okay, because as if we couldn't figure that out. So the doors close and Bond puts his feet over on the edges because he thinks the floor is going to open, but instead it gets filled with gas and he gets knocked out. But instead of going to the lobby, the elevator goes all the way to the basement, which is funny. It's not just basement because you see the numbers on the elevator. It's like, levels 4, 3, 2, 1, lobby, and then basement 1, basement 2, and then WW for Willard White at the very bottom. So he goes down into the Willard White section of the basement where Mr. Went and Mr. Kidd find him, and is like, and Mr. Went is like, "If at first you don't succeed," and I try again, Mr. Went. So they go in, take Bond, throw him in the trunk of the car, and
they leave through some sort of crazy Batman exit. Okay.
Right, before that, when they throw him in, Bond, something falls out of his pocket or something in the trunk of the car that he falls on top of. I think it was like maybe a tracker or something. He falls on top of it, so that way when they get out to the desert to where this construction project is happening and open the trunk, they pull Bond out of the car, and you see this little device has been like broken from Bond like lying on top of it. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Maybe it was a tracker or something. Parts of this movie are confusing, but it's like, okay. So their brilliant plan is to put the unconscious Bond inside this pipe, which has no covers on either side, hoping that he'll be out long enough and that the construction workers won't notice that he's in it. Unbelievably, this works. The construction workers move the pipe into this big pit, and they start burying it along with the other pipes. Bond eventually wakes up, and I'm like, hey, this moment reminds me of The World Is Not Enough. Or, even though it would have been the other way around, where the machine's moving through, welding it on the inside. Bond ends up jumping on top of it because he realizes he can't outrun it. And
it's an actual machine. That's a thing that does a job in the real world.
So then we cut to these two employees. They're like, I hate it. Why is it every time this thing breaks down, we have to go to one way out in the middle of nowhere? So they open the lid, and then Bond comes out, and he's like, oh, hello. I was just walking my rat, and I kind of misplaced it. Some weird quip line.
But there is an interesting... He does mention when he meets the rat initially in the pipe, before he meets the spark robot, he's like, someone smells like a tart's handkerchief. Oh, I'm afraid it's me. Which does come back at the end, and he's like, I've smelled that aftershave before. Anyway.
Right. Okay, yeah, so he comes out, he walks away, and then we go back to Vegas or some office somewhere, because he's talking to Q and Felix, and Q is talking about the technology, about the voice box changer and how elementary it is. Like, yeah, I gave it to the kids for Christmas. And Bond uses that voice changer device to call Blofeld, who thinks he's talking to Bert Saxby, and Bond pretends as Saxby that, oh, Bond's escaped, we're going to be in trouble, what are we going to do? And Blofeld's like, don't worry, Willard White, he's fine, he's up at his summer home. And he's like, what is it with you, Saxby? You're usually not this panicked. I'll take care of Bond, no big deal. So Blofeld hangs up the phone, Bond gets his information, and Felix is like, oh yeah, it's right outside of town up on the hill. So Felix, Bond, and this whole posse of cops and CIA agents go up to Willard White's summer house, which was filmed at another place in Palm Springs, the Elrod House. And for some reason, I don't know why, Bond insists that the whole posse should stay outside while he goes up there first to investigate. So he goes up there, walks in, and he finds these two women in there. Hi, I'm Bambi. And the other one's like, I'm Thumper. And they do this weird, like, gymnastic stuff, kicking Bond around, and eventually it ends up in the pool, where Bond, rather unbelievably, gets the one-up on both of them, holding them down, trying to drown them.
Well, okay. So I think you're underselling this particular scene. This makes no sense again. This sort of jumps out of nowhere, no pun intended, in the same way that, to a lesser extent, that the moon base thing happens. It's like he goes up to the summer home. Now, these are the bodyguards for the home. This is security.
Right.
And I'm Bambi, I'm Thumper, and they do, like, James Bond starts being all James Bondy, and he's all for Thumper. And because Bambi's all the way across the room, nobody's got time for that. So anyway... They're doing their thing, and then they start beating up on James Bond, and they brutally throw him around like a rag doll. And yes, then they throw him in the pool, which was the wrong move in the fight because it's their weakness. They're like way lighter in water, and so James Bond pretty much, you never see Thumper again. Is it Bambi or Thumper? Which one's the white one? That's not racist.
Yeah, Bambi.
But gone. So I assume that James Bond drowned her.
Well, I'm not sure if that's it. I think what it is that he's got them both in the water. Felix and everybody finally storm the building, and they're like, well, where's Willard White? And Bond's like, well, I was about to find out that information, and he dunks them back underwater. Eventually, one of them tells them where to find him. They all start going down the stairs, the outdoor stairs, to get access to the rest of the house. Thumper's kind of hanging over the edge of the pool, catching her breath, and the way the camera's positioned, you can't really see the whole pool. So I assume that Bambi's over on the other side, and we just can't see her. So Bond now completely soaked with water, but I guess he dries in like the matter of a couple seconds because he goes down the stairs, goes inside to meet White, and then a very odd
doggy.
A little bit, and then a very surprisingly odd casting choice. You have Jimmy Dean as Willard White, and he kind of is here to explain most of the plot to us. At first, he asks, "Did Bambi and Thumper give you any trouble?" And Bond's like, So they insist on, we got to talk to you, sort of thing. And
hey, before you move on, I don't know who Jimmy Dean. Who is this person? I know it's an American icon. I'm Canadian. I have no idea who this guy is. I've heard that
part-time actor, innovative country little singer, and he had started this sausage company. Makes these little sausage sandwiches and other breakfast type stuff that he made tons of money on that they still sell today. And so his nickname was Jimmy Dean, the Sausage King. But it was odd.
Of Chicago?
No. But it was odd that I just thought it was odd that they cast him in this role. But and the fact that they go back to they go outside the house, and Bert Saxby shows up and starts shooting at them. Felix's guys take care of Bert, and it's not really clear why Bert, the real Bert, is here because
makes no sense.
Yeah, why is he here? Why is he trying to kill? Okay, so they kill Bert. Felix's guys kill Bert, and Willard's like, "Hey, is that Bert?" And Bond's like, "Oh yeah, it is." And he's like, "Oh, tell him he's fired." And it's like,
again, a very Roger Moore era James Bond interaction, even with Connery's reaction to Walter White and just sort of like that sly, annoyed. Did I say Walter White as well?
You did.
It's ruined.
Yeah. So they go back to White's penthouse, and Blofeld is since gone because he is in a weird scene. He's decided to go undercover cross-dressing to get out of the casino, but Tiffany sees the cat. And I don't remember, why would Tiffany recognize the cat and think Blofeld in that instance?
That is an excellent question. You skipped over Q in the field.
Well, I'm about to get to that point. So yes, Q is there. She sees Q and they're talking, and he's using this nifty gadget to basically rob all the one-armed bandits in the casino, which is actually pretty cool. And also, Q, you're committing a crime on camera in front of all these casinos. You better hope you're valuable enough that they'll bail you out. So, yeah, and he's trying to explain to her how this gadget works, but because she noticed Blofeld's cat, she decides to go follow outside, and she can't. She tries to catch a cab, she can't. So then she ends up getting in the car with him, and he makes some type of comment, and it's really weird that we see him now all cross-dressing, and it's like, man, this is really.
Well, but the thing that really bothered me about this is that we just recently saw Blofeld's penthouse. It has an elevator that goes to the Walter White level, or the Willard White level.
Yeah.
So you can have an emergency exit out of the Batman cave.
Exactly.
Anytime you want, but you decided to go all Eddie Izzard.
Yeah, and so he does that, and now she's his hostage, and they take off, and Bond and Willard White and Felix end up back at White's compound, and they're asking him now, drilling him for all these questions. This is where we find out the plot of what's been going on in this movie, and basically, Willard says Bert Saxby handles all of my stuff out, and he doesn't know how. Bert, of course, he doesn't know how Blofeld would have gotten in contact with him because initially, we're sort of tricked into thinking that Bert must not know that it's Blofeld because he's using the voice changer. But obviously he does know because he just tried to kill them at the summer house and they had to mow him down. So Willard is explaining that this scientist, he's the big guy into lasers. And it sounds like it was an investment that he was doing that he wasn't really aware of. And Bond's trying to tell him about all this stuff going on out at the lab. And Willard's kind of oblivious to it. So they go, they check the lab and the satellite's gone. And so Willard gets on the phone and calls the guy immediately from where it was, because by the way, you have a cameo here from Shane Rimmer, he's going to show up again in The Spy Who Loved Me. Showed up, I believe, he only went twice as well.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and he tells him, "Oh, well, Mr. White, we mailed that out to, we sent that out to or whatever." And he's like, "I didn't give you permission to do." And so he calls up this guy directly, and this guy answers the phone at the facility, and he says, "Oh, you're gonna love this. It's Mr. White on the phone for you personally." He's like, "Oh, great." And then he's just chewing him out about why is this here. He's like, "Oh yeah, we launched it just 20 minutes ago into orbit."
This is by far my favorite character of the movie. First of all, it's Seth MacFarlane's dad. I swear to God it is. Also, like, not really, but it looks like middle-aged 70s Seth MacFarlane's dad. And he gets chewed out for comic relief, but when everything turns and they can't abort, once he's been told what to do, he goes deathly serious, and he is all about the job. This guy knows what he's doing. He was just flattered for a second and then got back on task. I respect Seth MacFarlane's dad.
Okay. So then we cut to another guy who looks a lot more like Seth MacFarlane's dad, who I believe was the actual owner of the casino back at Circus for some weird cameo things. Like, okay. So Willard doesn't really know what's going on or what Blofeld's doing. He's like, I don't know how Blofeld could have gotten his hooks into my scientists and, blah, blah, blah. And Bond's like, well, what would he really need to do this? And he's like, well, if he's going to control the satellite, all he really needs is like a building, like a facility. And because Q had explained that how these tapes work to actually, which was a little hokey as to how exactly these tapes work to control it, but the satellite, but okay. And so Bond's randomly mentioning, oh, you can be anywhere from here to there as he's looking at the map on the floor. And eventually Bond mentions Baja.
Baja?
I don't have any facilities at Baja. Of course that's where it is. So we cut to Baja, where we have this oil rig.
Meanwhile, in Baja.
Yeah, so Willard, or Blofeld.
Yeah, Willard White. Oh, sorry, Blofeld.
Blofeld is on aboard, and we find out that the reason that the scientist has joined leagues with Blofeld is because Blofeld has tricked him into thinking.
Hang on a second. I can't. I have to go get a cigarette before you come back. I'll be back in a second. Keep going.
Yeah, like I said, so Blofeld, we find out that the reason that this Willard White scientist, expert in laser refraction, has joined with Blofeld is because Blofeld has tricked him into thinking that they're going to be using the satellite to force nuclear disarmament around the world, which they start doing by melting the nuclear weapons at NORAD and other.
And it's amazing. Okay, this is where the James Bond movie kicks in.
I don't know if it's amazing. The effects look really cheesy for their time, as you see. Like, there's a scene literally where you have this giant missile in the silo in North Dakota. It's turning ramrod red, and it's about to explode, but it doesn't cause...
There's someone in the corner doing this.
Yeah, and you have the same thing when in South Korea, or in North Korea, when the missiles are all lined up outside, and then you have
There's a guy running out in fire.
Yeah, bursting into flame.
It's amazing. It's like watching it sort of like Godzilla movie version of...
It is, and so... That's why the scientist has joined Blofeld. Because, we're going to force nuclear disarmament. And Blofeld's saying, we'll have world peace. So it's like, okay. So the real plan, of course, is that Blofeld wants to hold this nuclear supremacy for ransom after having demonstrated by blowing up a few cities. And he's rather surprised to see that the first person to show up here to see him is actually James Bond. And this odd device, they drop him in this big, puffy, I don't know what it is, like weird Fresh Life, I think, that floats in the water. Blofeld's guys pick it up, they cut him open, and Bond's like, "Oh, hello there, thank you, blah blah."
Have you ever seen the 1990s movie The Avengers, where they get in the bubble and they walk across water?
No.
Okay, well, it's kind of like that, but this is the precursor. It's just interesting because Sean Connery is in the 1990s Avengers movie.
Yeah, so they bring Bond up to see Blofeld, and Bond spots Tiffany Case, who's in a bikini, sunning herself, reading a magazine, like everything's fine. And Bond's kind of weirded out by that, but he goes in to talk to Blofeld and finds out that, okay, Blofeld kind of greets him by saying, "Oh man, I expected some world leaders, not you." And so he mentions to his scientists that, well, since they still haven't contacted us to meet my demands, how about we target Washington, D.C. next? I'm like, okay. And he shows Bond how they're monitoring the satellite with this map of the Earth, and you see like the red laser pointer on it dictating where it is. And he's like, oh, look, it's over Kansas right now. I was like, yeah, if we destroy Kansas, I don't think anybody will find out for a few years. Just be funny. So maybe we'll hit somewhere else, Washington, D.C. So Bond decides that he's going to he pretends to suck up to Blofeld and be impressed by his scheme as an excuse to get close to where the tape is. And Bond is like, "Oh, is it the tape? It's right here." And he presses the button, the tape ejects itself, and Blofeld's like, "Put that back, Mr. Bond." So Bond leans over and does what is really a really bad sleight of hand move, where it's so obvious that he's switching the tapes. He then puts the fake tape in there, and he's like, Blofeld's like, "Take him to the brig." So they take him to the brig down below, and then as they're walking him outside, Bond does this cheap attempt of trying to get away. It doesn't work. Tiffany shows up and she's like, "Oh, Bond, what's going on?" And he slips her the tape, and she falsely assumes that the tape she has been slipped is
the one that she's supposed to swap in the machine. Yeah.
We actually don't see her do this, but she does go back in and swap it. And so Bond is being led outside to go to the brig, and he tries this other escape, and she tells him what he did. He's like, "Oh, you fool! You swapped it back for the real one." And there's a funny line I forgot to mention as well, where Blofeld is talking, and Bond turns to Tracy, who's lying on the couch. He's like, "Oh, I see you won over the Dragon Lady as well."
Tiffany, not Tracy. Tracy's dead.
That's right,
Tiffany. But also, it was interesting because Tiffany does somewhat become another redheaded Blofeld femme fatale.
Yes.
For a brief moment, we know Blofeld digs the redheads.
Yeah, she did, because she's of course pretending to be really into this, and Bond's like, "Oh, you got the Dragon Lady on your side, blah blah blah." So then she'd even ask Blofeld, "Oh, can I accompany you?" And he's like, "Oh, well, not while you're wearing that. I don't want my scientists to get distracted." So that's when she had put on the other outfit, and then she swaps the tape with Bond and tells him what she did, and he's like, "No, you fool!" And then she goes back inside and tries to swap it again. She's not even doing a good job of disguising it this time. And of course, Blofeld sees that she has the other tape in her bikini, and he starts getting this really cheesy line about, "Oh, being a little cheeky, more cheek than usual," or something. And then he orders her to be taken to the brig as well. And he's like, "Oh, what a shame, such nice cheeks, just two dumb brains," or something.
Wait,
like that.
you brought up the brig.
Yeah.
What is the brig? Can you explain what?
It's like some weird. It's like basically a utility closet, I'm guessing, that's underneath this oil rig that they've locked him in,
with a hatch in the floor.
Yeah, with a hatch in the floor, and so okay.
With like rags over it. Rags are over the hatch, but Bond anyway, we'll get there. He escapes.
Yes, he escapes just as Felix and Willard White, for some reason, is here as well. And they're showing up in their helicopters. They're assaulting the base. Explosions start going off.
Okay, I got to stop you just because of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and you've got the helicopter attack on Peace Gloria and the incredible cinematography of that and what it looks like. How would you compare that particular assault to this oil thing?
The Peace Gloria one was a lot better.
Yeah, great. We're agreed.
So the explosions are going off and everything. Bond gets out to the trapdoor. Tiffany kind of gets away. Blofeld insists on getting out of there in his mini sub. So he gets in the mini sub, and the crane operator's trying to lower it into the water, but then Bond, punches the guy out. And I thought it would have been great if he had been able to get on the radio and actually talk to Blofeld and, annoy him, but he couldn't, which is kind of odd. And so Bond resolves to just smash Blofeld's mini sub into the side of one of the buildings on like the office building, as if that's sufficient. And
we stop seeing Charles Gray as Blofeld at all. Like at the last time that Charles Gray is on screen, he's like, "You damned idiots, not up, down." And that's the last time you see him. And then he's just whacked into the walls, or at least you assume that he's within that sub, like some kind of wrecking ball, I guess. Tiffany Case is given a gun. She shoots it and falls off the entire oil rig. And then James Bond does a swan dive while everything blows up around him. It was great.
We don't even see them get rescued from the water. But, that explosion, they messed up that when they filmed it. They actually blew it up when the cameras weren't running, and then they had to do it again.
Wow.
Pretty crazy. So then we cut to this ship. Confetti, and yay, everybody's going out to sea, and Bond and Tiffany are there, and
it's like a cruise ship. It's a celebratory travel back to England, I suppose. From where are they?
I guess they're in Baja, or they're back in America now. And so
wow.
Willard White and Felix are there, and Willard's like, "Hey, Bond, if you enjoy enough of your time, just tell the captain, and I'll have him go, drive, or just tell the captain, have him drive circles around to extend the trip," type thing. they're like, okay, bye-bye. And the camera pans down and we see Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd are on board. So then we cut to this veranda and this veranda suite that Bond and Tiffany have. Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd, she mentions to him that I need to ask you something really pressing. And she's like, I need you to really think about the answer before you answer. He's like, okay. But then Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd come in and interrupt them. And they're like, hey, we didn't order this big 5-star dinner or whatever. They're like, oh, it's
courtesy of Walter White.
Willard White.
No, I did it on purpose that time.
So they're starting to sit down at dinner. And Mr. Wint is trying to talk him through what each of the dishes are. And he specifically is talking about the wine. That it's not, the 55.
It's
and Bond asks about the cabaret. And he's like, oh, well, Mr. Wint's like, I'm afraid we were out of that. And Bond's like, but the damn 55 is a cabaret. And then and of course, the reason Bond asked him this is because he recognized the aftershave or whatever cologne that he's wearing. They didn't mention that, but that's kind of where he's going with it. And so then Mr. Kidd, getting ahead of it, picks up these 2 shish kebabs, lights them on the fire, and is about to come over and stab Bond while Mr. Wint puts Bond in a chokehold with this chain. And Tiffany, like a moron, just gets up and goes cowering over in the corner and isn't going to do anything. So Bond ends up kicking his legs across thing to knock the 2 flaming shish kebabs into Mr. Kidd. He catches fire, which is a pretty cool stunt because you can tell the guy's like actually on fire. Much better than the people who were burning up from the laser. And Mr. Kidd is screaming, and he jumps overboard to his death, and we barely see a flamed, charred corpse in the water. And Mr. Wint is obviously very upset. He tries to choke out Bond more, but he's not very good at it. So Tiffany finally gets an idea to do something. So she picks up the hand to throw it over his way. Bond finally breaks free, turns Mr. Wint around, and leans under between his legs to grab to
bomb?
grab like part of the outfit or whatever, rips it almost like he's giving what or something, like pulling it under, and then he twists it to tie the bomb onto because the bomb was in the cake. And Mr. Wint does this really high-pitched, excited scream like there's something sexual going on, and then Bond just flips him over the deck, and Mr. Wint explodes. And then Bond and Tiffany sit back down. They're kind of fine, and he's like, "What was that thing you wanted to ask me?" And he's like, how are we ever going to get the diamonds down? And he looks up in the sky and sees what is presumably the satellite and just kind of smiles. And then the end credits roll. Where diamonds are forever.
And James Bond will return? James Bond will return. Does it say which one? Does it say which one it is?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was very confused watching the majority of this movie as I was trying to recap it. Like, so much of it rolls into each other and is so confusing. I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to need help on this one because it's just so trying to remember all the scenes because of the weird logic and the way it jumps around. And I admit that I like the idea that you're kind of guessing as to where the plot is going because, okay, it's a diamond smuggling operation, but to what end? It's like, where are we going with this? But Blofeld's ultimate scheme is a bit, okay, it's really out there. I don't like that Tiffany Case started out as like this competent diamond smuggler, or we thought that's who she was going to be, and instead she's kind of ditzy through most of the movie. The fact that they have the confusing bits, like how did she know about Blofeld's cat? Why is Plenty O'Toole dead in the water? Weird things like why is Bert Saxby showing up trying to kill him? And weird things like this throughout the movie kind of take me out of it a bit. And the weird moon base. Okay, it's like trying to figure that. I don't know. What did you think of this movie?
Well, Kat, I really like this movie.
Really?
I find it to be interesting. Well, it's also one of the James Bond movies that I came to later because I always heard that it was so bad. I didn't like the way that James Bond looked. It was like, it is that sort of the way that people deride George Lazenby's solo James Bond movie. I deride this one as Sean Connery's solo James Bond movie. So I enjoy it much more as watching a Sean Connery movie. As opposed to a James Bond movie. I admire the pieces, but as a whole,
I think I liked this movie a lot more when I was a kid. Watching it now, it's like, I guess as a little kid, you just don't think about all those little intricacies in the plot, whereas here, it's just like, wait, how do they do this? What's going on? It's like as a kid, it's like you're going from one fun set piece to another, whereas here, it's like watching it with a more analytical eye. Granted, bearing in mind that every Bond movie is going to have some plot holes and things like that because it's trying, it's fantasy. They're just trying to have a good time. But with this case, it's just kind of, with how unappealing the cinematography was, how unappealing the casinos look, and just the weird stuff of the cross-dressing and the fact that I was really curious, like I mentioned earlier, what would this script have looked like if they didn't get the Howard Hughes thing? 'Cause clearly the Willard White character was like a thank you, a backdoor way of thanking Howard Hughes for his help. So let's shoehorn in this character who ends up being very instrumental in letting us understand what the actual plot of the movie is. So it's like, if that character and that whole plot device wasn't there, what would this movie have looked like? Probably very different.
I'm sort of waffling back and forth. And like, have you read the original novel?
It's been a while.
Okay, and I've been trying to plow through it for about 3 years. And anyway, but I love this movie because it is in the category of so bad it's good. I like it, but it's bad. Like, there's something about it. I can see the production. I can see the frustration. I've read the behind the scenes books, like the 50 Years of Bond. And I know that you're a fan of the behind the scenes sort of oral storytelling that goes behind every one of the productions. I know that Roger Moore did a book on Live and Let Die, and I'm sure that you've read it. And so these kinds of things are really interesting. And I see the production and the give me money, and like, I know that Harry and Sean didn't get along very much, and it was definitely just, this was a perfunctory James Bond movie, and you can see it. And when they do something well, I really enjoy it, but a lot of it is sort of almost bordering on parody.
Yeah, like I said, as a little kid, this had a lot more fun and charm to me, and it does still have that 70s charm, like I mentioned. It's like, I don't really regard it as much of a secret agent movie, because again, all the secret agent-y type moments in this movie feels like there's missing information, like to the point of, like I was mentioning earlier, how do we connect the dots from here to there kind of thing. I mean, you could tell that everybody had a riot shooting this movie. Like Connery said that he'd be golfing all day and partying in the casinos all night long, and then he would just be totally out of it on the weekends. And so, I mean, yeah, it sounded like it was a riot to shoot. A lot of fun times were had, but and another thing is that one of the other reasons they were able to get Howard Hughes to help them is because he met Cubby in the 1920s, and they were very great best friends for like 50 years almost at that point. And so every time they made a James Bond movie, they would send a very special print to Howard Hughes to watch by himself, which is pretty cool. Which is why he was probably eager to get involved with this one. But for a movie that's trying to sort of allude to the whole mystique of the Howard Hughes thing, it's doing it in a kind of an odd way. And the fact that, the moon base is, it's like it feels like there's a conglomerate, all these different ideas are being sort of thrown into this one movie. Because it's like, it starts out making it sound like it's going to be a very grounded diamond smuggling operation, like a low-key, James Bond adventure, trying to uncover some diamond theft ring or something. And then you take a hard left turn where we go to Vegas, and we got like the 40s era gangsters, and you got the weird stuff going on in the casino and the games, and the weird Jimmy Dean, the Sausage King, for our Blofeld guy, and the Blofeld there, and the cross-dressing. But it's going all over the place. And I admit it's a very fun movie when I was a little kid, and maybe in the right mood for it. But watching it today, I was just like, yeah, no. It was
a gleeful bad.
Yes, and like Mr. like Mr. Went and Mr. Kid, for example. I think they're too sinister to be villains in a comedy film, but I also think they're too goofy to even in this movie. Like other villains, like Odd Job or Jaws, they have their thing, like the bowler hat and the steel teeth, but it works and it doesn't feel too goofy, even though on the surface it really is. Whereas here, it's a bit just weird. I mean, I really wanted to like this more watching it today, but yeah, like you tell, Connery is not really James Bond in this movie. He's just along for the ride. It feels like every line of dialogue he says is just it feels way too scripted. I mean, obviously all the Bond movies are scripted, but it just feels too much like it's scripted. I'm not getting sucked in by the performance or anything. I mean, he didn't seem. I mean, I guess yes, this performance is worse than the one he gave in You Only Live Twice, because it had been a long time since I've seen this one. But yeah, this performance is definitely worse. But I admit that I had a little bit more fun watching this movie than I did You Only Live Twice. That one I just felt was a bit more of a bore. Whereas this one, in spite of all the silliness, it kind of gives it its own, like I said, its own sense of 70s charm and being like a silly, fun movie. It's just kind of off kilter for a James Bond movie. Like, again, this is the third time in a row they've used Blofeld as the main villain, but they don't want to commit to a decent climax for him. Like, I think this is probably the worst climax in a James Bond movie because of just how weird it all comes together. Like you said, the last time you see Charles Gray as Blofeld is when he's in the mini-sub mentioning that, oh, it's up, not down. And it's like, okay. And I thought it was cool interesting that they cast Charles Gray after he played Henderson in You Only Live Twice. I'm not exactly sure if that was just them being lazy or they just thought he was that good. Whatever.
And Charles Gray was in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, that came after this, though.
Well, maybe this was the inspiration.
Well, yeah, this is actually the 50th anniversary of this film, by the way.
Oh.
Diamonds Are Forever, December 1971.
Heavens. How appropriate.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and also, you only need one G in between the G and the A to make this Don't Give a Forever. Kat, you want to see what's going on in the chat?
Well, we got to give it our Martini ratings first.
Oh my God, I know, but the thing is that my Martini rating is absolutely destroyed. After seeing No Time to Die, it's a complete reevaluation of the entire Craig era, and then I do have to go back because, well, actually, you know what? Before we started the Craig era, I think that my ratings were semi-okay.
Yeah.
But now, like, I got to give Diamonds Are Forever. Like, this is a 2. This is a 2. Like, I love it, but it's a 2.
Yeah, it's not as boring as You Only Live Twice, even though it's really hokey and weird. And for that, I'll also give it 2 martinis. Because I admit I do love all the scenes that Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd are in. They're a delight.
Yes.
And Charles Gray is good as Blofeld. It's been a while since I've seen that. So he is good. And some of the scenes by themselves are fun. It's just that when you put them all together as one movie, in the same movie, it does feel a little weird. But, certainly certain things are iconic about it that people will remember, like people remember the car chase. They remember the weird moon buggy thing. They remember Bambi and Thumper, and they remember Wint and Kidd and the Willard White stuff. It's very has a lot of memorable stuff in it. I just didn't.
Well, and as you mentioned, how those things all connect is a mystery to me too.
Yes, I'm going to give it a 2 just because I do find some enjoyment out of watching this one as opposed to You Only Live Twice, which I thought was a bore. So I'll give it a 2.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I was going to throw Thunderball under the bus, but I'd rather watch Thunderball than this.
Well, Thunderball I thought was much better than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
anyway.
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
Check the chat.
Yes. Let's see what everyone is saying. Hey, Angelica. I'm going to turn this off because you guys can get some what the hell? Love? That's it. All right. Hey, look, I'm here. I'm looking for Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Captain Deckard Spock, welcome. Thank you for being a friend with the trophies. So you are alive then, Scotty. I am.
Did people think you were not?
Well, it's touch and go all the time. Captain Deckard Spock, shocked by spoilers. James Bond dies. Yeah, but he returns. Cam. Welcome, Cam. Thank you for being here, man. Scotty R37 and Catherine, ahoy.
Ahoy.
Bumpmaster 1. Hello there. Cool show. Thank you, Bumpmaster 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, please comment, like, subscribe, all the things, the buttons. Cam says, Captain Deckard Spock, hail! And Tim's Talk is here. Ah! Hey, Tim, what's going on? Happy almost soon to be successful orbit. Tim's Talk says, Diamonds Are Forever like carnation? Diamonds Are Forever. It might be more of an Eastern thing in terms of chocolate, because it sounds like Diamonds Are Forever is like a carnation chocolate. But from what I understand, I could be completely misconstruing the entire thing. Cam says, stalking you. Ha ha ha. And Sherry says, who's being stalked? Cam, Sherry. Inquiring minds want to know. Thank you for being here, Sherry.
Yeah.
Cam says that sounds like a pricey mistake. It
was.
most like
blowing that thing, and that's a funny story. Is when the special effects guy's like, "Oh shit," and he turns to the director trying to explain it, and Guy Hamilton was apparently very calm when he said this, and he says, "I'll handle it." And they're like, "Above that, I'll handle it." And so, because they did get the movie, it was a $7.2 million budget, and it made $116 million, so pretty profitable.
What was this? Hi, Sherry. Apparently all of us. Well, hey, you know what, Sherry? If you have an entourage, thank you for being here. Great minds think alike. Well, thank you for having a great mind. Do we know Sherry? It's so lovely that she's here, though.
It is lovely that she's here. I don't think she's commented before.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Welcome to the have a martini, have a gadget, have a gun. And Cam says the story lacks cohesion. Definitely. It's definitely not the best outing for Bond, nor for Connery, I don't think. But that does, that winds up the chat. James Bond will return next week. And do you have any anticipatory thoughts in regards?
Yeah, I have some anticipatory thoughts of that movie. Fun.
Are you looking forward to next week's flick?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. It's going to be a new Bond. We got Roger Moore.
Yeah.
So thank you again to the captain, Deckard Spock. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Bumpmaster 1. Tim, thank you for being here. Sherry, thanks. I'm glad that you have fans. But for Kat, do you have anything that you want to plug, promo, anything like that?
Just join us for the Live and Let Die review.
Okay. That sounds good. And I'm just going to leave you with a little something from Steve, who couldn't be here today. Yeah, and the broadcast, yo.